Welcome everybody to Rad Pod and Chill. My name is Heidi Kuda. I'm here with Jim Stewartson and High Fidelity. That's so much better. This is
Yeah,
this
that
is
was weird.
this is how it's supposed to be, just like
Wow.
this. This is how it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. And then I have to trick my brain to look to the left if I want to look at Jim. I don't know. I still don't know. Welcome everybody. I know that those who are spending some time here with us, we thank you because it looks like Dolly Parton maybe live at some country music awards, and that's a big tall order because we all love Dolly. So if you're here with us, we thank you very much. I am really excited to talk about the weekend news because there was so much good news, and I have learned from my friend Jason VT that what we need to do is take the wins where we can get them because there were a lot of wins this week. There was Chaos Agent George Santos,
Santos.
who has, and what is it, a 13,
13 felony charges.
yes, among them money laundering and lots of fraud stuff in there. And that's a big deal
Hmm.
because I've
Hmm.
noticed it's very interesting to me that I've noticed, and this is something that our friend Mia Bloom has pointed out repeatedly, that chaos agents will say one thing in front of the press and in front of the media, whatever, like wherever they can, on podcasts, but they say very, very different things when they're actually under oath, and I think that's quite fascinating. So yeah, so I'm excited about that because he is the most obvious of the theater craft, agenty chaos types, including the fact that there was money allegedly that transacted between a Vexelberg cutout and him. So it just syncs with everything that I've certainly been reporting on for the last 6.5 years. Anything that you guys want to talk about there before we move on to sexual batterer?
He was a operative of Brandon Straka who did Walkaway, who is the most Kremlin-y chaos op in the fucking world. So you know, the thing that I hope the Justice Department does is not figure out what forms he lied on. That's great. That's a good way to catch him up. But I want to know who the fuck paid him all that money to be a goddamn Kremlin chaos agent, thinking that he was going to be completely unaccountable to anything. That's
I believe they don't even care because my studies of how it works in Russia is that they just keep casting these characters. It's like Marjorie Taylor Greene right after the insurrection. Suddenly there's video of her everywhere trolling David Hogg. It's like, she's the one who's delivering the stochastic terrorism and pumps. And then, right after the last election, all of a sudden George Santos is everywhere, and you've got the media following him around like lapdogs, and that's going to be the new distraction. So I don't think they even care. But one thing that probably really bothers the war criminal in the Kremlin is he did find out that there is still signs of life in America, that we are still allegedly a rule of law country. And we saw that with the civil lawsuit that came, the decisions that came down this week in the Trump Eugene Carroll battle.
Hold on a second. I got to say something about Santos.
Sorry about that, Hi-Fi.
If that fucking guy was spending money on designer clothes, why does he look like such trash?
Oh, come on. That's just low. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come
I'm just
on.
saying.
Yeah.
I don't think he spent that money at Saks.
Well, so that's not what I care about. What I care about is my country. And I'm very concerned for my country because there seems to be no shortage of people willing to take money to try to overthrow our very precious, imperfect democracy. That's really what I care about. So I do think it's very important that we all now freely can allude to Trump as a sexual batterer. I think that's a big deal. He already confessed to that on tape many years ago, but to be able to actually have him held liable to the tune of $5 million. And I just want to say something. for every woman who just persists and persists and persists, this was quite a landmark week. So kudos. And I am told that E. Jean Carroll is possibly considering bringing another case in light of the fact that Trump was allowed to defame her again live on a national news network.
Can I just bring up one thing? So there's a lot of language parsing about what Donald Trump did and what the jury found. There is a technical distinction between what fucking body part was used to invade a woman, and it does not fucking matter at all. He's a rapist.
Thank you.
And I don't think anybody should be afraid of saying that, right? The only thing the jury wasn't positive about was whether a particular body part was involved. Does that fucking matter? Really? No, it doesn't matter at all. He's a fucking rapist, and it's okay to say it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, so as somebody who 7 years ago wrote about the Jane Doe complaint that was filed at that time by a woman who was a teenager who had allegedly been lured into participating in some parties that involved underage women and old dudes. I've done a ton of reporting in my lifetime on the subject of human trafficking. And I remember writing at the time that the only thing different in that complaint and everything else that I'd ever read was the size of their pocketbooks. That was the only thing that was different. And the media studiously ignored this complaint that was available to everybody before the election. And then came the tapes where Trump admitted to being a sexual assaulter. And if anybody has any women out there are listening and you've been sexually assaulted, you will understand that what he was confessing to is as horrible as anything that I can think of. And so not quite sure why so many Americans decided that he was their guy. But shame on you, because we've had to live with that, and we've had to live with that phrase for all these years. And shame on you for applauding and laughing and anybody who voted for him again, because he represents nothing good for this country. And at some point, I think that people are going to become aware of that, but not until we deal with our media ecosystem, which continues to radicalize people away from decency. It's really what's happening.
Fucking CNN, Joy Reid said, CNN has managed to turn itself into Twitter, which is about as precise as it gets, man. Putting that motherfucker on to re-traumatize E. Jean Carroll, much less the rest of the goddamn country, is fucking criminal. I'm sorry, but fuck you, CNN. You knew exactly what he was going to do. You knew exactly what he was going to say. I mean, if you're going to do it, tape it, and then put subtitles. Have a fucking octopus of people around it, like debunking that shit in real time. But instead, all you did was you fucking platformed the 60,000 lies or however many fucking lies he told while he was in office. You're re-traumatizing all of us. Nobody needs that shit. Nobody needs to see him. Your fucking LARP about how it's educational is bullshit. You're doing it because you think it's good for your ratings.
It's beyond that. They're doing it because they apparently back fascism. Let's just call it what it is. It's a big business. They think fascism is going to be good for it. What they did was so incredibly dangerous. It was so incredibly dangerous. It's what happens in countries that are already well on their way toward authoritarianism. That's why they did it. Jason Stanley explained to us on our very own show, RadPod, that big business backs fascism. And that's what we saw last night. We saw disinfotainment, a elongated disinfomercial, and it is so incredibly dangerous for our country. And I could not help, I did not watch, I haven't had a television since 2006, as you guys know. I don't watch it. I read everything. But I heard a few seconds, which sounded like a laugh track and a clap track, you know, and what I saw in my head was 1976 Network. I saw literally Network in my head, where the cult leader is performing for the studio audience. And we've had many decades between Network and now. We've had many decades. We've had many decades between 76 and now to know better. And we are watching our media go into reverse very quickly. We're watching all of our state houses pass laws going in reverse. And thank God that there are shows like ours and friends like ours, like David Pepper, who is a one-man Democratic machine in Ohio who's rallying everybody to protest. I mean, we're very lucky that there are some gutsy people who are not obeying in advance. The authoritarian right is already acting as if they're already in power, even though they're the minority. And the Democrats and the pro-democracy, folks are already obeying in advance, and that's a big problem for me.
Normalizing this thing, they've taken the Overton window, which is, the place that you're allowed to talk, and moved it all the way to fucking Nazis, and they're completely fine with it. That was your metaphor of Network was exactly right. It was a cult leader saying cult shit to cult members who, whenever he said the most egregious, horrendous possible shit about another person, the cruelest thing, what happened? Got the most laughs, the most applause. They fucking loved it. And what does that tell the audience? The millions of people in listening to that fucking garbage and hearing people react that way, that it's okay to react that way, that that's somehow fucking normal to applaud when a fucking fascist gets up there and starts lying, starts saying shit about human beings.
Are we still here? You're muted.
Yeah, something blew up. I don't know what it was.
I'm going to jump in unless you want to finish that thought.
I was yelling about fucking CNN and Caitlin Collins, man. Like, sorry, but if you're gonna put somebody on stage with him, it's got to be somebody who is willing to stand up to that monster, and that just wasn't it. Wasn't it at all.
What was going through my head, because obviously when I looked on Twitter last night as I was writing a piece and I saw the outrage, just the shit show of outrage again, I just reflected on what Alex Alvarova taught us, and that things that anger you should be things that you step back from and say, what's going on? We are being forcibly manipulated by this type of, this type of stunt. And just let me be very clear that Trump is a criminal, okay? There's no reason why a network should have had a criminal on to deliver a disinfomercial, whatever you want to call it, to the American brains. I am reflecting a lot on what our friend's father, who was high up in government, said in 2016. He said America is going to become like Russia now. What CNN did last night was put the fine point on that. CNN became exactly like Russia last night. They've been like it all the time, but they allowed a criminal who is a professional propagandist to lie and defame and mislead the American public again. And I think we've had enough of it. And I do hope people have had enough of it. Trump is a dangerous, dangerous criminal, and he is not alone in being a dangerous criminal. He is part of a cabal of criminals in America that are really hurting our country. And if you can't tell the difference between the patriots now and the criminals, then start reading books, stop watching television, for fuck's sake.
Should go ahead, High Five. You need to talk now.
I do need to talk now. Do you guys know the Nazi bartender story?
No.
No.
Does it involve farts in jars?
No. Okay. This was sitting in a bar, and hanging out, talking to the bartender, and this guy comes in, and he's got a jean vest, it's got an iron cross, and the bartender just reaches down, grabs the bat, slams it on the bar, points at the guy, and says, "Get the fuck out." It's like, whoa. Guy left. He said, "Man, you can't give Nazis a fucking inch. You let that guy sit in here. Tomorrow he's in with 3 of his friends." A week later, the whole place is packed with Nazis. You're running a Nazi bar. So the first one sneaks in. You got to throw him the fuck out right away. Well, we haven't done that, but it's never too late.
It's not too late. And again, I am watching our Department of Justice do certain things that make me think that there is life in this country when it comes to rule of law. This is 2023. It's now or never. It's now or never. We have people who are, we see that we have these recurring massacres, and we see that these recurring massacres are linking back to people being radicalized in chat rooms. And in case anybody's confused about why I started this show, it's because Jim Stewartson was screaming about people being radicalized in these chat rooms on Telegram, on these Russian-funded and founded platforms, or by people who are actually linked back to Russian money. And he's been screaming about it for years. So we decided to do a show where we investigate disinformation and bring the world's greatest experts on, because we wanted people to be warned about this. And all that we've gotten in return, aside from street cred and a lot of amazing episodes and the group of people who believe in us, is we've taken nothing but shit. And you want to know something? The radicalization problem is continuing and expanding. And I talked to another lovely human being yesterday who asked me a question where I immediately knew he's in one of these rat holes. And he is. He's now anti-vax. He's now anti-immigrant, which is odd because he's an immigrant. And people's minds are being picked off. I don't know what it's going to take other than us screaming every single week to pay attention. Other countries can do something about it. Why can't America?
Well, I mean, not very many countries have done much about it. Look, yes, our show gets a lot of shit. I get a lot of shit. And, look, there's a reason for that. So let me, if I may, address the elephant, as it were, in the room.
And we're not talking about hi-fi.
Yeah, I was wondering there for a second. I'm like, what the fuck's he talking about?
I was waiting for somebody.
I know I'm wearing gray, but
I was waiting for somebody to land that plane, and you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't have to say it.
Baby, take a bow.
I
love you.
Lieutenant General, retired Michael T. Flynn, fucking sued this guy. I want to be clear about the entities that have been sued by this particular guy. The Federal Bureau of Investigations, who he hates because they would be responsible for picking his ass up.
Again.
The second entity that he's suing is the fucking Justice Department. Because he's all bent out of shape that the Justice Department fucking took his confession twice, conviction twice, agreement to cooperate twice. That's why he's suing the Justice Department, because for a fucking second, they had a backbone for a fucking millisecond, right? So he's going after the FBI because he doesn't want to get investigated. He's going after the Justice Department because they did it already. And he's going after this fucking guy. And this podcast right here. He is the former National Security Advisor. Okay, it was only for 2.5 Scaramucci's. But he was the National fucking Security Advisor, the DIA chief, the top military intelligence person in the goddamn government.
Multiple degrees in war studies.
This guy. And this, in aggregate, this podcast. Why the fuck is that? I just need people to think about that for a minute. How many people have you seen talk shit about Mike Flynn? I don't know, millions? Like, everybody who has a fucking brain in their head has said something about this guy, right?
Malcolm
Everybody
Nance.
knows he's dirty as fuck.
Malcolm Nance.
But he goes after this guy, us. Why? Because I'm right. I'm sorry, trolls and dirty journalists and all you motherfucking LARPing fake researchers and fake journalists. Fuck you. I'm right, and you know it. And you're protecting this motherfucker. This guy who's trying to overthrow the government of the United States. David fucking Gilbert. Who the fuck are you again?
He's the guy that can't read the lawsuit.
No. You are calling me a conspiracy theorist just like Mike Flynn. Is that what you're doing? Have you seen this guy's Twitter feed, David Gilbert? Racism, transphobia, pro-Putin, anti-Ukraine, over and over again. Propaganda to tear this country down. And you're taking this guy's side and smearing me in your shitty little website? I don't fucking think so. So I need everybody to hear me. Mike Flynn, I am not backing down. I am not shutting up. You can send all the fucking trolls you want at me to tell me I need to shut up and get a lawyer. You have no case. The truth is an absolute defense. There's nothing malicious about this. We want to save our fucking country. So, you may take your lawsuit and shove it up your ass. And all the people sympathizing for him, you can do the same thing with it. Thank you for coming to my fucking Flynn talk. Arrest Mike Flynn.
That's a lot of stuff for Mike Flynn to put up his ass.
All I want to say is that I want our flag back.
I'm a little turned up today. I apologize.
I know. You understood. I
I
want
have
our
no idea
flag.
why. What could possibly have happened?
I want our flag back. I want the word patriot back. I don't want patriot to be synonymous for Russian asset. I think it's very clear when we talk about somebody like Donald Trump that we should talk about him like an American Yanukovych, even had the same handler. I think we need a reframing. We are seeing what Ruth Ben-Ghiat is calling a lot of malignant normality. What you saw last night was malignant normality. I have become Twitter friends with a Scottish comedian who's going through chemo treatment for cancer, and she's still funny as shit. And guess what she has assigned to her? You're never going to believe it. Paid trolls or sociopaths or both who like to give this woman a really hard time, despite the fact that she's actually in the fight for her life. And so I would like to know where the protections are for people who actually are the real patriots doing the work of democracy, and not the people who get on stages with flags and big machine guns and pretend that that is patriotic. That is not patriotic. That's not patriotic. So I'd like to know. I'd like to know where the protections are for people who are trying to do the labor of democracy. When I
There's
first
a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Those two things are different. They get conflated intentionally by fascists because they take your actual patriotism, your actual love for your country, and they warp it. They warp it for themselves. Guess what else they do? They take your love of Jesus Christ or whatever you love, and they grab that too, and they warp that into their fucking ideologies. That is the whole project. That's why you see all the patriots with their weird spellings in their American flags behind them, because they have been mind fucked to believe that fascism is patriotism. It is not. Sorry, Heck.
No, that's a really good point, and I don't think that a lot of people make that distinction. So,
You know what? I'd like to hear somebody else talk about Mike Flynn for a second. Can we do that?
well, specifically talking about people who are virulent Kremlin propagandists.
Specifically. And yeah, I found it funny that, well, anyway, watch this and we'll talk about it.
Eaton. I am married to an Army veteran, 3 children, all soldiers.
What role do you see QAnon playing in January 6th?
This propagation of conspiracy theories that they pushed out, they were able to get a following. They were able to create a cult-like following.
Yeah.
You use the word cult-like in describing QAnon. Another word we hear quite a bit is PSYOP, which is a military term. Can you tell us what that means?
Whenever you have an op plan, you have a PSYOP component to it, and information warfare. A PSYOP campaign used to be dropping leaflets behind the lines during World War I. Now it's the internet and all the tools available to it. So this whole PSYOP thing is being developed to a degree that is pretty scary right now.
Are you familiar with the Reawaken tour that's happening across America right now?
Scary stuff.
General Flynn gets on stage, reminds everybody that they are part of his digital insurgency, but they are now spiritual warriors. We are now engaged in spiritual warfare. What do you make of that?
It's dangerous. When you're talking about a reinforcing function of a big tent revival, reawaken, call it what you will, that is a re-indoctrinating event. When you talk about Flynn generating a digital army, every one of those people is a potential foot soldier available to General X Flynn. That's the scary part of all of this. Mike Flynn, at one time, was a very respected general officer.
Do you think there could be an element of him having been psyoped?
I mean, he sat down to break bread with Vladimir Putin, so there were plenty of opportunities. But the question that you pose should be posed to the Secretary of Defense, what are you doing about this renegade retired Lieutenant General? That is a great mystery to all of us. Mr. Flynn should be brought back on active duty and given a trial for offenses that I believe he has committed.
So what I found was interesting is when I posted that in my discussions with Mr. Gilbert, he stated that if we're falling back on that documentary, we've already lost. And I just find it weird that, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to talk about disinformation agents that collaborate with stalkers anymore. What I would like to talk about is Major General retired Paul Eaton. That's not me saying those things. I didn't say that. That man did. Now, I may get hot under the collar and go on TED Talks and whatnot. If you heard that man, he was telling you exactly the same things that I'm telling you, that we've been telling you. That is what's going on. Just one little thing going back to Mr. Gilbert. That was on Vice TV, which is a separate division of the near bankrupt Vice Corporation, which, for a time had the wisdom to actually put credible information on the air.
I just find it very moving and tragic and powerful and sorrowful that somebody who took money from Russia, broke bread with Vladimir Putin, was forced to give that money back from Russia and lied to the FBI and was, found guilty, is allowed to go out and continue radicalizing people en masse. And why I find that so sad is because I'm 100% sure, as we talked about earlier, that there are so many good people in those rooms. I probably know some of them. In fact, I do know some of them. One of them at least, maybe two. And these are not bad people. But the idea is to have them then go out into their communities. And what we are seeing is an escalation of the radicalization that we witnessed on January 6th, which, as Jim has been saying for a few years now, was a practice run. So again, I say to my country, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, what Eaton was talking about there, right, is a process of radicalizing people through religion, spiritual warfare, right? Exactly what we were just talking about. They grab the religious part of your brain, the magical thinking part of your brain, the spiritual part, whatever you want to call it, and they attach all of this to it. Speaking of the Reawaken tour, and speaking of the rapists in Florida, at Trump Doral this weekend, there's going to be another Reawaken event. And as I have done with dozens of these, I will cover it, I'm sure, and I will post videos, and people will be absolutely outraged at the insane fucking shit that's going on at these things, where human beings are inflicted with psyops for 30 hours. Cult leaders fascists and anti-vaxxers and neo-Nazis and Holocaust deniers and every fucking horrible kind of human being you could imagine, filling their head with genocidal ideas, right? That's what goes on at these events. They are Christo-fascist QAnon cult events. And the point about these people leaving these events and then going out into the world and spreading what they've learned is the real point. It's not just about the 3,000 people who are getting brainwashed, right? It's about all the people in the audience who are getting taught the ideology, the techniques, and given the resources to help them. Oh, you need a YouTube channel? Here, we got this guy. They are organized, well organized. If you come out of those events and you pay your $500 or $1,000 or whatever the fuck it is, you're going to come out of there armed as a digital soldier. Now, what's very important about to understand historically here, this is something that the U.S. has done in other countries for a long time. Gone in and radicalized people. It is just, it has happened. He knows how to do it. Not only that, he studied ISIS, he studied Al-Qaeda, and he gathered all of their psychological terrorism and radicalization techniques into a single white paper in 2012 that he could spread among all his allies so that they could learn how to use those techniques, not against our enemies, against us. And that is what's happening right now. That's what you're seeing. These people who are out there screaming these things that make no goddamn sense at all, people that just seem like batshit terrorists, they're that way because they're basically like jihadists, right? They have been brainwashed to believe that it is a life or death decision for them to either go against their government and their fellow citizens or not. That's what we're talking about here. That is going on at the rapist's golf course, who was just platformed on CNN. It's going to be at his place. And guess who is running the entire show? The whole thing is invented, and all the connections are to who? Mike fucking Flynn. Who is what? Suing the FBI, the Justice Department, and me. That's fucking weird, isn't it? Also, one last thing. I really, really, really need people to understand who Alexander Dugin is. Alexander Dugin has been called Putin's brain, and that's not a joke. He invented Eurasianism, which is why Putin is so fucking insane about Ukraine. What is Mike Flynn's psychological operations tour named after? Alexander Dugin's book. And it's not like some coincidence. The Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. Both his book and Mike Flynn's tour are named the same thing. The guy who is literally creating the architecture to commit atrocities in Ukraine. He named his tour after that. That's going to be at the Rapist Golf Club. So let's just try and level set as humans and see what's going on and start to say something. Rise the fuck up, man. That is going to create dangerous people that you're going to have to deal with in your neighborhood. that are going to threaten your family, that very likely have a shitload of guns. We need to defeat this.
I do want to say that when you say other countries aren't doing anything, they are. Sweden, Estonia, Finland, Denmark, I realize they're smaller, but they recognize that there was a cognitive warfare going on, and they began to educate third graders and inoculate them mentally against it. And they made the tech companies pay for it, and they work with their government to inform people. So there is an awareness there. In America, we're actually allowing the same people that we are exposing week after week to try to dismantle our education systems. Teachers are actually quitting and leaving in Florida because it's gotten so bad. Just today, there was a headline that somebody sent me that a council person's home was raided, and she thinks it's because her husband's a journalist. We know exactly what's happening in Florida. And speaking of journalists, if you have a major public figure who is knowingly on the record lied to the FBI, held a position in the Trump administration, was fired by 2 presidents, suing the Department of Justice and the FBI, which there's been massive amounts of coverage on, and also suing Jim Stewartson, but you don't actually reach out to do anything about it unless you are simply in the bag for Flynn, which we're seeing. That's kind of weird. It's just sort of weird. I've been a reporter for decades, and hold on, Jim, I want to say, everyone knows how to reach me. They might have wanted to call to say, why did you start this podcast with this guy who's been called a lot of things and Hillaried for the last 3 years? And I would tell them specifically why. And, nobody's been doing the work like you've been doing the work, and nobody had the experience that you had. And I think probably few people are quite as stubborn as you to continue doing the work under heavy fucking fire all day long. So it's interesting to me. The very first story we did together in Byline Times really laid it out. And
there's a lot of frightened people. This is scary shit. I'm the frog in the pot. I didn't intend to be in this motherfucking situation. I can tell you that right now.
Same.
But I am stuck in this fucking situation, and if so fucking be it, right? But the reason why people don't report on Mike Flynn, don't say the truth about what he is because they get this. They get this treatment. They get treated like we have. Because people are understandably afraid of that shit. They're understandably afraid of me because I'm all radioactive, because a bunch of trolls are running around talking shit, and and Q sued me. And you guys are too goddamn scared to see what's in front of your goddamn nose. Whatever, man. I gave up on y'all. One of you maybe surprise me. Shoot me a fucking email. Everybody on the goddamn earth has it, so go ahead. I'm right here. I got the best story in the goddamn world right here for you.
Yeah, well, all I know is that if they think that they're not coming for you, they're coming for everybody. They're coming from if we don't defeat this, if this doesn't stop, they're coming for everybody. It's not just Jim. It's not just the trans community. It's not just the gay community. It's not the immigrants allegedly at the border. It's not just women's rights and women's healthcare rights. It's not just school boards and teachers. I think I've sort of made my point, but I could keep going. Educators, philosophers, coming for everybody. So you either want to see this American experiment continue or you don't. And it's that simple. It's truly that simple. So
I need to say something about the people who are coming for us, because I would like to remind all the decent, good people out there that the people who are coming for us, who are causing all these problems, well, I'm going to let Kier say it.
Oh,
Unfortunately, that seems to underlie a lot of the most enthusiastic Russian propagandists, is that they have been dealing with severely damaged personalities and personal failure for most of their lives. In fact, the overlap between the number of Russian propagandists who also turn out to be convicted sex offenders is absolutely startling. There are some deep-seated fundamental personality flaws that actually predispose people to being available to be made use of by Russia. And if you look back at the KGB handbooks for recruiting agents of influence, agents of subversion, or indeed propagandists, then you can see very clearly that Russia understood the misfits make the good targets, the people with a grudge, the people who feel they've been treated unfairly by the world because they've been consistent failures, and therefore seek revenge. And you can see that revenge coming through so strongly in some of the verbal attacks that you hear from the trolls, from the so-called independent journalists, the ones pushing the Russian propaganda lines, because the bile and the vitriol and the hatred that they pour out when they're talking about people who criticize Russia, it's extremely personal, and it's plainly tapping deeply into their own personality defects.
That is who is scaring off normal, decent people.
It is. And unfortunately, literally.
Yeah.
Like, so, our friends who watch this and people who are paying attention at all know misogyny is the easiest way to divide people, right? It's the most fundamental difference that you can exacerbate, and they've been doing it forever, right? It's misogyny has been a way of controlling populations and dominating for a very long time, but it became weaponized online about a decade ago in very serious way with incels, right? Now the incel movement has been called a national terrorism threat by the Secret Service. Multiple mass murderers, including this motherfucker in Dallas, associated with this movement. That's all about sad little boys who are unable to get what they want. And they turn violent, and they collect together, and they form little gangs, and they swarm up on people. And they invented a whole new, not new because Hi-Fi will argue with me, but they perfected trolling, which is really stalking, which is really terrorism, in Gamergate. And guess where all these assholes come from, or a lot of them. No matter, and it doesn't matter, and I want to be clear about this, this is not a political thing. Gamergate wasn't political at all. It was about being woke, believe it or not. It was about being too woke in video games. And oh, look at these women being woke. Let's go try and stalk them to death. That's what that was. It was a suicide cult. It was trying to get people to kill themselves. That's what the whole point of it is to harm people, to disable them, and ultimately destroy them. That's where all this shit comes from. On the left, it metastasized into Bernie Bros and Chapo and all the tanky motherfuckers you see running around. And on the right, I don't even have to tell you about that. The entire GOP has been taken over by that shit now. But it comes from misogyny. It comes from weak men who cannot get what they want. And what, if anything describes MAGA, describes the rapist who's going to host this fucking party this weekend. Weak men who can't get what they want. That's what we're dealing with, including the piece of shit who's suing me, who is deeply, dangerously misogynistic and has been fomenting this horror in the United States for a decade.
It's very sad. It's sad that it's come to this. I mean, 7 years ago when I was so uncomfortable because even though I don't have a television, I could hear Trump's voice. And I had investigated him as an investigative reporter, and he was always associated with fraud and pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes and ripping people off. And I could not figure out what it was that was just causing me just such like agony when I would hear his voice. And then I heard the former Prime Minister of Canada say that he uses the vocabulary of misogyny. And then I was like, oh, right, that's what this is. And I was propelled back to the 80s when greed was good and the patriarchy, was living large. And here we are. Here we are, 7 years later. The ugliness has been unleashed. We've had to live with these ugly words. The hate speech has been so repetitive that it has eroded our collective decency. We're no longer as decent as we were. And as Jim said, we also are in an empathy recession. And I'm going to keep screaming as loud as I can right beside you guys to try to get people to be aware of it, that these defective human beings cannot be in charge of our government. They can barely be in charge of their own families. And many of them have committed crimes against humanity and our country, and they should not have any freedoms to continue radicalizing people.
Yeah, they fucking men. We're just watching, and you've described it. We've all seen it. We see people just getting picked off. We see it. It's like, okay, that person was normal, and now that person isn't. What happened? What happened to that person? Did they all of a sudden just change personalities out of the fucking blue?
Or were they
How many people do our viewers think to yourself? How many people do you know that used to be lovely, lovely people that are stark raving fucking nuts?
Too many.
Why is that? Did they really all just have a change of political heart? Did they really all just decide all of a sudden that the rapist in Florida is the best guy on the planet? Did they really decide that for themselves, all these people? Did they really decide that their sister or son or brother is a pedo because you voted for Biden? Is that something that happened because of politics? Or because people have grievances? No. It happened because they're casualties of war. They were attacked and harmed. Their brains were changed against their will, and they were programmed with a bunch of bullshit. But guess what? The good news is they have to keep a constant stream of it in their head in order to keep that lie alive.
I didn't know that.
We can stop this fucking thing if we stop the propaganda. Make it not okay to brainwash people in public. We have to get over it. We have to figure out that it's okay to stop people getting hurt. Because those people who are getting hurt are going to start killing people.
They already have. They already have every day.
There's 400 fucking guns in the United States.
400 million.
Yeah.
I was like, 400 would be great.
That'd be great. We could handle that. 400 fucking million guns, more than people. And how many of those crazy people that used to be lovely that now think you're a pedo have guns? Like maybe all of them.
So what I would like to
I'll land my plane.
Sure.
We are not dealing with politics. We are dealing with psyops. We're dealing with psychological warfare. We're dealing with casualties of war. And we need to start calling them that. We need to start recognizing them as that. We need to start recognizing the trauma that we all feel because of it.
Yeah.
If you've lost somebody to this war, you have lost somebody.
Yeah. I've lost lots of somebodies.
So when I was coming up on the internet as a young man, there was a darkness on the internet that it started out fun and it quickly turned evil. And then it got really, really evil. And there were Nazis and pedophiles. And Jim and I talked about this in our podcast about Anonymous. But now that evil that used to just be on the internet, it has grown and it has metastasized. It has had a collar thrown on it by wicked men. And it has been unleashed through your screens into your minds. And we're fighting that creature. It came from the internet, and we really got to kill it.
It was let me build on that. It came from the internet, and it was bred on the internet. It was intentionally fed on the internet. People like Steve Bannon saw things like World of Warcraft guys going around trying to gather gold and trolling other people out of it and stuff. And he thought, ooh, this is like you can do gangs and you can influence people and you can hurt people in video games. Awesome. And he built up whole companies to harass and defraud people out of fucking World of Warcraft currency. This is a bunch of sick psychopaths who want you to kill your fellow citizens because they believe it benefits them.
I told you guys that I learned listening to Timothy Snyder that famines are always political, which I found shocking, and that there's a mindset of the evil people that we're talking about where the peasants are going to die anyway. And those two things have given me some insights in the work that I'm doing that are profoundly important. But we have 66 episodes of our weekly podcast, and we have some great stuff coming up. And I want to end this particular Rad Pod and Not So Chill with a Ukrainian soldier. Things aren't chill right now. It's cool. With a Ukrainian soldier who we interviewed, who's on the front lines of the kinetic war that will be coming here if we don't defeat this now. And he has some very choice words about liars and what it means to be promoting lies and what it means to be doing the work of what these Russian assets are doing to harm our minds and the world at large.
give you an example of how I see Russia and their propaganda way of thinking. Imagine you're in a bar, yeah, and you have a nice time with your friends, and you just having fun. And there is always a guy in the bar who is just staring at you, and he already want to fight with you, and everybody know it, you know, and you can pretend he's not there, you can pretend like you're avoiding him, blah, blah, blah. But there is only two ways to solve this question: or you ending your beautiful evening with friends and just leaving, which will be smart if you are able to do that, or you need to fight this bully. There is only one chance to do it. And with Russia propaganda channels, you need to make them forbidden. It's lie. It's just lies. They're ruining the world. According to Aristotle, when you're saying lie, you're creating world which doesn't exist, and you put people into world which doesn't exist. So in one moment we'll realize that it was not true. They need to build their world from scratch, and that's why Dante put traitors in the worst place of hell, because they are creating a world which doesn't exist and force people to live in a world which doesn't exist.